Chosen one. This message is not for everyone, and I need you to hear me clearly right from the beginning. Only those who genuinely walk the divine path of the Most High should continue watching. If someone is here without a real connection to God, without a heart that seeks truth, growth, and spiritual wisdom, they should not move another second forward. But if you are truly one of God's chosen, then stay exactly where you are, because this message has been sent to you at the perfect time. There are no coincidences in your journey. Heaven aligns everything with precision, especially when your destiny is at risk of shifting off its rightful course. Chosen one. Your spirit has been sensing something lately. A pull, a pressure, a silent warning. This message is arriving as confirmation. If you avoid what is being revealed today, your fate may begin bending toward the path of a fallen angel. One who once carried divine authority but lost everything through disobedience and delayed alignment. But if you listen, if you stay with me until the end, what you hear today will protect your calling, strengthen your spirit, and realign your destiny with heaven's intention. Before we go deeper, I want you to share your thoughts in the comments. Choose only one number that matches what your spirit feels right now. 777. And make sure you subscribe to Spirit Guide, tap the bell icon, and share this message with someone who needs divine clarity.
The spiritual law of falling. How destiny can descend when guidance is ignored. Chosen one, there is a spiritual law woven into the fabric of creation. A law so ancient and so absolute that even celestial beings were governed by it. This law does not bend for angels, prophets, or chosen ones. It remains unchanging, because its purpose is to preserve divine order and safeguard the destiny of those entrusted with spiritual authority. When a chosen one steps out of alignment with divine instruction, the descent begins slowly, silently, and subtly. It rarely announces itself loudly. It begins as a small shift in the heart, a quiet hesitation, or a moment of ignoring the guidance sent specifically to protect your future. This message reaches you now because heaven sees what you cannot yet fully see. Your destiny is hovering near a turning point, and your response to this instruction will determine whether you ascend or begin sliding downward. A fall does not start with rebellion. It begins with neglect. A fallen angel did not lose their place in the heavenly realm in a single moment. Their descent started the moment they ignored divine wisdom and elevated their own desire above God's will. That same pattern attempts to repeat itself in the lives of chosen ones today. When you avoid a divine message, you risk stepping onto the same path that once led to a celestial collapse. You may believe you are simply postponing obedience, but spiritually, a downward shift begins. The atmosphere around you becomes heavier. Your discernment becomes weaker. Your inner clarity becomes dimmer. These are not ordinary moments. They are early warnings that divine alignment is slipping. Chosen one. Every message sent to you from heaven has a season attached to it. God speaks in divine timing, and instruction always comes at the moment you are most vulnerable to spiritual redirection. When you delay obedience, you create spiritual tension between your purpose and your actions. This tension opens cracks in your aura, allowing confusion, distraction, and emotional instability to seep in. At first, it feels minor, almost unnoticeable. You feel a little off, a little tired, a little unfocused. But spiritually, a descent is forming. You may feel pressure without knowing its source. You may feel restless without understanding why. These early indicators are heaven whispering, return before you drift too far. Ignoring guidance always affects your destiny more than anything your enemies could ever attempt. Darkness cannot pull a chosen one down unless that chosen one is already disconnected from divine instruction. This is why ignoring spiritual messages is far more dangerous than any external attack. Attacks can be resisted. Forces of darkness can be rebuked, but a neglected divine instruction shifts your spiritual path, weakens your authority, and brings you closer to the same pattern that transformed heavenly beings into fallen warriors. Divine instructions are given to protect your assignment. When ignored, they become witnesses against your spiritual progress. A chosen one begins fighting unnecessary battles because they stepped into territories God never instructed them to enter. They begin experiencing delays because they moved without divine timing. They begin losing opportunities meant to elevate them because their spirit is not positioned where heaven needs them to be. This is not punishment. It is the spiritual consequence of stepping out of alignment with divine order. Your purpose was written before you were born, and heaven designed your journey with precision. When you drift, your purpose does not drift with you. It remains fixed in the divine realm. The more you wander from instruction, the heavier your life becomes. You feel spiritually out of place. Your spirit becomes restless. Your emotions fluctuate. This discomfort is not random. It is destiny calling you back. It is heaven pulling you away from the slope that once caused angels to fall. If you ignore these calls long enough, the distance grows, the clarity fades, and the spiritual descent accelerates. A fallen angel was once powerful, radiant, and favored, but favor without obedience leads to downfall. Many chosen ones underestimate the seriousness of ignoring divine guidance because they assume their calling guarantees protection. But calling without alignment becomes vulnerability. When you avoid messages sent to realign you, you unintentionally step into the same spiritual pattern that once brought destruction to those who were closest to God. You must understand that the enemy watches moments of spiritual neglect carefully. Darkness cannot overpower a chosen one who is aligned with divine instruction. But when you hesitate, delay, or dismiss divine warnings, you create openings. These openings allow confusion to influence your decisions. They weaken your spiritual sensitivity. They lower your defenses. And before you realize it, you begin drifting from who you were created to be. When spiritual descent begins, it is rarely visible at first. You may notice subtle signs: weakened prayer life, decreased intuition, emotional instability, lack of motivation, loss of spiritual hunger, or attraction to distractions that drain your energy. These signs indicate your path is shifting. You are moving toward a spiritual imbalance that mirrors the early stages of a fallen angel's descent. The tragedy is that many chosen ones misinterpret these signs as normal struggles, unaware that they are drifting away from divine alignment. Heaven never allows a chosen one to fall without sending early alerts. This message is one of those alerts. When God warns you, it means He sees a danger on the path ahead that your natural eyes cannot detect. Divine messages do not come to frighten you. They come to save you. When you ignore them, you step into the unseen traps that were meant to be avoided. You begin carrying burdens that were never yours. You begin facing storms that obedience would have shielded you from. But understand this clearly, chosen one. Although the spiritual law of falling is real, it does not decide your fate. Your obedience does. Your humility does. Your willingness to listen does. Just as angels fell through disobedience, chosen ones rise through alignment. The law is neutral. Your response activates the outcome. Heaven is giving you clarity right now. You are being shown the invisible danger of neglecting divine instruction. You are being reminded that spiritual descent is not sudden. It is gradual. It begins with silence toward God's voice. It begins with postponing decisions that were meant to be immediate. It begins with distractions that replace spiritual discipline. But it can be stopped at any moment through awareness, obedience, and realignment. Chosen one. This message is the divine intervention meant to restore your spiritual direction. Heaven is revealing the spiritual law of falling not to condemn you, but to prevent you from stepping into a fate that was never meant to be yours. You are being lifted before you slip. You are being awakened before you drift. You are being strengthened before you break. Your destiny is too valuable to risk through spiritual neglect. Your calling is too important to allow disobedience to reshape your future. You were created to rise, not fall. You were chosen to ascend, not descend. And now that heaven has spoken, your alignment must follow. The Most High is calling you into obedience, clarity, and responsibility. If you honor this instruction, your path will rise. If you ignore it, the descent will begin quietly, just as it did for those who once stood in divine glory. Heaven has given its warning. The next step belongs to you. Why the enemy targets you when you ignore God's signals. Chosen one. The enemy does not attack you randomly. Darkness studies patterns, observes your spiritual habits, and waits for the precise moment when your guard is lowered. The most vulnerable moment for a chosen one is not during spiritual warfare, but during spiritual negligence. When you ignore God's signals, you unintentionally create an opening. That opening becomes an invitation for confusion, deception, and emotional imbalance. The enemy has no power over a chosen one who is fully aligned with God, but alignment weakens the moment you neglect divine instruction. Heaven sends guidance to protect your destiny. When you delay or resist that guidance, the enemy sees an opportunity to influence your direction. The enemy targets chosen ones strategically because your obedience threatens the kingdom of darkness. Every time you listen to God, you step into greater authority, greater clarity, and greater spiritual dominion. But when you hesitate, darkness senses instability. That instability is the enemy's doorway. A chosen one who is unsure, distracted, or unresponsive to divine signals becomes easier to discourage. The enemy uses whispers to distort your perception. He uses distractions to weaken your sensitivity. He uses emotional heaviness to disconnect you from spiritual awareness. All of this becomes easier when you miss the messages meant to strengthen you. Ignoring God's signals creates spiritual silence. Not because God stops speaking, but because the noise of the world becomes louder in your mind than the voice of heaven. The enemy thrives in noise. He thrives in chaos. He thrives in the moments when your spirit is not anchored in divine direction. This is why he watches you closely when you delay obedience. He knows that a chosen one without guidance is like a warrior without armor, powerful but exposed, strong but unprotected, called but vulnerable. The enemy's strategy is not always obvious. He rarely begins with direct attacks. Instead, he begins with subtle influence. He plants thoughts that challenge your purpose. He creates circumstances that trigger doubt. He uses people to distract your focus. He introduces temptations that appeal to your weaknesses. These subtle tactics only succeed when a chosen one is spiritually unfocused. When you ignore God's signals, you become more sensitive to fear than faith, more sensitive to anxiety than discernment, more sensitive to emotions than spiritual truth. Chosen one. The enemy watches for hesitation. The moment you hesitate with God, you accelerate with confusion. When angels fell, darkness did not need to attack them aggressively. Their own pride and disobedience pushed them out of alignment. The enemy simply watched and waited. He uses the same tactic with chosen ones today. He knows he cannot destroy you, so he tries to influence you into destroying your own clarity. When you ignore God's messages, you begin questioning yourself. You begin making decisions from your feelings instead of divine instruction. This is exactly the state the enemy wants you in, because confusion is the soil where spiritual traps grow. Another reason the enemy targets you during spiritual negligence is because your destiny carries influence. When a chosen one rises, they lift others. When a chosen one awakens, they expose darkness. When a chosen one obeys God, they become a channel for divine power. But when a chosen one drifts, the enemy sees a chance to slow down heaven's movement through your life. You are not being targeted because you are weak. You are being targeted because you are impactful. Your obedience disrupts darkness. Your clarity destroys deception. Your spiritual authority forces the enemy to retreat. That is why he waits patiently for the moment you ignore a divine signal. Chosen one. Ignoring spiritual warnings creates energy imbalances around you. Heaven tries to pull you one direction, while your unaligned actions pull you another. This tension weakens your spiritual field, making it easier for external forces to affect your emotions, relationships, and decisions. You may feel heavier without knowing why. You may feel irritated, restless, or disconnected from your purpose. You may feel spiritually numb. These sensations are not random. They indicate that you are drifting into a territory where the enemy hopes to manipulate your path. The enemy especially targets chosen ones who are close to breakthrough. When heaven prepares to elevate you, divine messages increase. But so do distractions, so do emotional temptations, so do spiritual tests. When you ignore the messages meant to shield you, the enemy gains temporary influence over your atmosphere. This is why some chosen ones experience sudden attacks after avoiding God's warnings. It is not that God abandoned them. It is that their obedience did not meet the instruction heaven required for protection. Chosen one. Many of your hardest seasons came not from attacks, but from missed signals. When you moved before God said move, the enemy entered through impatience. When you stayed where God said leave, the enemy entered through stagnation. When you trusted someone God warned you about, the enemy entered through access. When you ignored your intuition, the enemy entered through deception. But here is the truth. The enemy only exploits openings that you leave unguarded. When God speaks, he closes the openings. When you obey, you seal the cracks. When you align, you fortify your spirit. The enemy knows that once you return to divine instruction, he loses influence instantly. That is why he tries so hard to attack during seasons of spiritual negligence. He knows your power. He knows your authority. He knows your calling. And he knows that the only way to interfere with your destiny is to disconnect you from the voice that guides it. Chosen one, the enemy fears your obedience. He fears your awakening. He fears your spiritual discipline. He fears the moment you fully submit to God's direction. That is why he targets you when you ignore divine signals, because those are the only moments when your spirit is not fully fortified. But heaven has exposed this strategy. This message is your awakening. If you have ever felt spiritually attacked during moments of confusion or hesitation, comment only one number, 777 or 444. Let your spirit acknowledge what it already understands. You are not being targeted because you are weak. You are being targeted because the enemy knows what you are becoming. He sees your elevation before you do. And now that you understand his strategy, you will no longer fall for his attempts. You will rise with clarity. You will move with precision. You will listen when heaven speaks. And the enemy will lose the access he once thought he had. Your alignment is your protection, chosen one. And now your alignment begins again. How to recognize when you are drifting from your divine path. Chosen one. Drifting from your divine path never begins with a loud warning. It begins with soft shifts in your spirit that you often overlook because they feel familiar, manageable, or temporary. But these small spiritual changes are the earliest signs that your destiny is being pulled away from heaven's alignment. When you understand these signs clearly, you can stop the descent before it becomes a spiritual fall. Every chosen one must learn to recognize these signals, because awareness is the first act of spiritual protection. The first sign of drifting is the subtle dulling of your spiritual sensitivity. You do not lose your discernment suddenly. It fades gradually, like a dimming flame. You stop sensing dangers early. You stop feeling the weight of spiritual instruction. You may hear God's signals, but you no longer feel urgency to respond. This is the soul's quiet cry that alignment is slipping. A chosen one cannot afford to ignore this because sensitivity is the shield that guards your destiny from unseen traps. Another sign is the rising of inner restlessness. Restlessness is a spiritual alarm, not a personality trait. When your spirit is aligned, even in chaos, you feel grounded. But when you drift, even in calm environments, you feel unsettled. You feel like something is missing. You feel disconnected from your inner stability. This restlessness is heaven calling you back before you unknowingly follow the path that once led powerful beings into spiritual loss. Emotional instability also grows when you drift. You experience mood swings, unexplained sadness, unusual irritation, or moments of sudden emptiness. These emotional waves are not random. They are signals that your spiritual center is weakening. When a chosen one moves away from their divine purpose, the emotions begin carrying the weight of their neglected destiny. This is why chosen ones often feel heavier than others. Their spirit refuses to let them settle in misalignment. Your prayer life becomes inconsistent when you drift. You may intend to pray, but you feel mentally scattered. You may start, but you cannot stay present. You may speak, but your heart feels distant. Prayer becomes a task instead of a connection. This weakening is not because God is far. It is because your spiritual frequency is shifting to a lower level. A chosen one's strength is found in spiritual connection. When that connection weakens, their destiny becomes vulnerable. Another sign of drifting is when your intuition becomes unreliable. You begin making decisions based on your assumptions instead of spiritual truth. You choose what feels easy instead of what feels right. You sense warning signals but silence them. You notice red flags but continue anyway. This is how a chosen one unknowingly mirrors the early descent of a fallen angel, not through corruption, but through repeated choices that ignore divine signals. Isolation becomes appealing when you drift. Not the healthy isolation meant for reflection, but the dangerous kind that disconnects you from guidance, community, and accountability. You begin withdrawing from people who carry divine wisdom. You avoid conversations that hold you to spiritual standards. You silence the voices sent to realign you. This kind of isolation is where darkness plants confusion and bends your journey toward misdirection. Another indicator is the rise of distractions. When you drift, your mind becomes easily consumed by things that drain your energy, but offer nothing meaningful to your destiny. You lose focus on spiritual discipline. You procrastinate divine assignments. You spend time on activities that numb your awareness. Distraction is not harmless. It is a spiritual thief designed to keep you busy while your destiny grows distant. Your dreams shift when you drift. Chosen ones receive spiritual messages through dreams, visions, and night impressions. When you are aligned, your dreams carry clarity. When you drift, they become chaotic or empty. You wake up feeling spiritually disconnected. This change in your dream life is not accidental. It reflects the state of your spiritual alignment. Dreams are windows into your inner world, and when the window becomes foggy, it is a sign that your soul is drifting into spiritual imbalance. A major sign of drifting is when you begin tolerating what you once refused. You excuse behaviors you once avoided. You entertain conversations you once rejected. You allow energies into your life that do not match your calling. This spiritual lowering of standards is dangerous because it happens slowly. You don't recognize the drift until you are far from your original conviction. A chosen one must guard their standards because fallen angels did not fall suddenly. Their standards eroded over time. You also know you are drifting when you feel disconnected from your purpose. You may not know why, but you feel lost, confused, or directionless. You question your path more than you walk it. You question yourself more than you trust God. This sense of disconnect is not failure. It is a divine alert showing that your spirit is searching for the alignment it once had. Purpose becomes quiet when the path is no longer clear. You know you are drifting when peace becomes rare. Peace is the signature of divine alignment. When peace fades, misalignment has begun. If your spirit feels unsettled even when everything around you seems normal, it means your soul is not where it should be. The Most High uses the absence of peace to pull chosen ones back into spiritual order. Peace is not just comfort, it is direction. Relationships also reveal drift. When you are aligned, the wrong people are removed. But when you drift, the wrong people begin reappearing. Old patterns, old connections, old temptations, and old distractions return. When these re-enter your life, it is not coincidence. It is a sign that your spiritual boundaries have lowered. The enemy waits for moments of drift to send influences that pull you farther away from your divine identity. Another sign is when obedience becomes difficult. Small instructions feel heavy. Simple spiritual disciplines feel overwhelming. You postpone what God told you to do immediately. You delay actions that once came naturally. This resistance is the soul's way of signaling that misalignment is deepening. Obedience requires spiritual energy, and drifting drains that energy until obedience feels impossible. When you drift, your atmosphere changes. You sense heaviness in your home, tension in your spirit, or fatigue in your mind. You feel spiritually attacked more often because drifting weakens your defenses. Attacks feel stronger not because the enemy gained more power, but because you stepped further from divine covering. A chosen one cannot survive spiritually outside the atmosphere of alignment. You also know you are drifting when blessings pause. Opportunities slow down. Favor becomes inconsistent. Momentum disappears. This is heaven's way of getting your attention. God often stops movement to prevent you from achieving success in a direction that was never meant for you. A paused blessing is not punishment. It is protection. Another sign is when your identity becomes blurry. You forget who you are spiritually. You second-guess your strength. You doubt your calling. You feel unworthy or disconnected from the authority God gave you. Identity confusion is one of the enemy's favorite tools during drift, because a chosen one without identity is a chosen one without power. Finally, you know you are drifting when God feels distant, not because he moved away, but because you moved without realizing it. The distance you feel is the space created by neglected instructions, ignored signals, and spiritual fatigue. But even in your drift, God sends messages, signs, and confirmations to pull you back. Chosen one. These signs do not appear to condemn you. They appear to guide you. They appear to protect you. They appear to bring you back before your path resembles the descent of those who once carried glory and lost it. Heaven is calling you back into alignment, and now you know the signs. Divine correction, how God realigns the chosen before they fall. Chosen, one divine correction is not punishment. It is protection. It is the sacred way God steps into your life to pull you back from dangers you cannot yet see. When you begin to drift from your divine path, heaven does not simply watch in silence. The Most High starts arranging situations, stirring your spirit, and shifting your surroundings, all to realign you before you fall like those who once carried glory and lost it. Divine correction is proof that you are still chosen, still claimed, still pursued by God. The first thing you must understand is that divine correction is rooted in love, not anger. A parent who does not care will let a child run toward a cliff. A loving parent will pull that child back, even if the pull feels harsh in the moment. In the same way, when God corrects you, he is protecting your calling, your mind, and your destiny. If he allowed you to continue unchecked, your fate could bend toward the pattern of a fallen angel, one who once walked in radiance but drifted too far from alignment. Correction is the spiritual rope thrown to you before you slip beyond the edge. One of the earliest forms of divine correction is a sudden heaviness in your spirit when you move in the wrong direction. You may try to force a decision, relationship, habit, or path, but something inside feels uneasy. The joy is missing, the peace is absent. Your spirit will not fully agree. This is not random. It is the voice of God pressing gently on your heart saying, "Turn back now." When you ignore that pressure, the correction intensifies. The uneasiness grows. The situation becomes more complicated. Doors that once seemed open begin to close. This is heaven intervening before your misstep becomes a collapse. Another way God corrects you is by blocking what you thought you desperately wanted. You pray, you plan, you push, yet nothing moves. At first you may feel abandoned, but what actually happened is that God stood in front of a door you were never meant to walk through. A chosen one cannot afford every opportunity. Some opportunities are disguised traps. Some connections are disguised chains. Some apparent blessings are actually preparations for downfall. When God says no or not yet, He is not depriving you. He is shielding you from a future version of yourself that would be spiritually broken. Divine correction often appears through the removal of people who are no longer aligned with your assignment. Conversations dry up, friendships fade, certain voices go silent. You may feel rejected, but in reality, heaven is pruning your circle. Fallen angels did not fall alone. They fell in agreement with others who shared their rebellion. God will not allow you to stay bound to people who feed your drift, strengthen your compromise, or encourage your disobedience. When a connection suddenly crumbles without logical explanation, consider that it might be divine correction, not human failure. Sometimes correction comes through exposure. Truths you tried to avoid rise to the surface. Hidden intentions of others come to light. Your own weaknesses are revealed in ways you can no longer ignore. This can be uncomfortable, even embarrassing, but it is holy. God exposes what is unhealthy, so it loses the power to destroy you in secret. A chosen one cannot heal what they refuse to see. Exposure is heaven's way of saying, "I would rather you hurt for a moment in truth than live forever under a lie." Another powerful method of divine correction is isolation. Suddenly, the noise fades. The crowd disappears. The distractions drain out of your life. You may feel lonely, but spiritually, you have been escorted into a divine classroom. Isolation is where God rewires your thinking, heals your heart, and resets your priorities. Many chosen ones fight this season because they feel abandoned, not realizing that heaven has intentionally removed competing voices so they can finally hear clearly again. Isolation is not rejection, it is refinement. Divine correction can also manifest as repeated patterns that force you to finally confront what you avoided. The same type of wound keeps reappearing in different situations. The same conflict shows up in new faces. The same lesson keeps circling back. This is not bad luck. It is God insisting that you stop running from inner issues. Until you learn the lesson, the pattern repeats. Not because God is cruel, but because your unhealed places are open doors that could pull you far from your divine path if left unchecked. Sometimes God corrects you by stripping away false identities you created for survival. Titles, images, masks, and performances start to feel heavy. You can no longer pretend to be what you are not. Your soul grows tired of acting. In this holy exhaustion, God invites you back to your authentic self, the self He actually anointed. Fallen angels stepped out of their ordained positions. Divine correction pulls you back into yours. It reminds you that you were never called to impress people. You were called to obey God. Another form of correction is a sudden return of spiritual hunger after a long season of dryness. You begin to crave prayer again. You feel drawn back to wisdom, truth, and stillness. Your heart longs for purity more than attention. This renewed desire is not random. It is heaven breathing on your spirit, calling you back to the fire you once carried. When this hunger comes, respond quickly. Feed it. Protect it. It is a rescue signal from God, reminding you that your story is not over. Divine correction can also come through what feels like loss. Something you leaned on is taken away. A door you depended on is shut. A plan you built your confidence on collapses. In the moment, it feels like devastation. But later, with spiritual hindsight, you realize God was removing what you would have worshipped. He was tearing down what could have competed with him for your heart. Chosen one, anything you place above obedience becomes an idol, and idols always pull destinies downward. God corrects you by removing what attempts to sit in his place. There are times when God corrects you through a sharp inner conviction that will not leave. Even if you try to distract yourself, that inner voice follows you. You know you must apologize. You know you must walk away. You know you must change direction. Conviction is mercy. It means your heart is still responsive. The most dangerous state a chosen one can reach is not weakness, but numbness. As long as conviction still stirs your spirit, heaven is still actively working within you. Through all of this, you must remember, divine correction is always aimed at restoration. God is not trying to humiliate you. He is trying to realign you. He is not trying to strip you of joy. He is trying to strip you of what will steal your joy later. He is not trying to control you. He is rescuing you from choices that would have controlled you for years. Correction is uncomfortable because growth is uncomfortable, but you cannot rise while clinging to what is pulling you down. Divine correction is not a sign that you have failed beyond repair. It is a sign that heaven still has plans for you. It means your name is still active in divine records, your assignment is still valid, your calling is still alive. Many wish for this level of attention from God and never receive it because their hearts are closed. The very fact that you can recognize his hand in your circumstances is evidence that you are not abandoned. You are being trained, you are being guarded, you are being prepared. Do not despise the season where God says no, where God removes, where God exposes, where God redirects. These are the chapters that later become your testimony. These are the moments you will look back on and say, if God had not corrected me then, I would not be standing where I am now. Trust his hand even when you do not understand his method, because every correction today is protection from a deeper pain that waited in tomorrow. The path of ascent. How to rise above every trap and seal your destiny. Chosen one rising back into divine alignment does not happen by accident. It happens through intentional decisions, spiritual awareness, and a renewed commitment to walk in the identity heaven placed upon you. The path of ascent is not a straight line. It is a spiritual climb, a deliberate returning to clarity, strength, and obedience. When you rise, everything connected to your destiny rises with you. The traps lose their influence, the confusion breaks, the heaviness lifts. But you must understand the spiritual structure of ascent if you want to maintain it permanently. The first step in rising is recognizing that elevation begins in the heart before it appears in your life. Many chosen ones look for outward breakthroughs while ignoring the inward shifts God is trying to create. But ascent begins when your heart submits again, when your spirit becomes teachable, when your inner posture bends toward God instead of your own understanding. A chosen one does not rise by force. They rise by surrender. When you surrender your will, your plans, your fears, and your stubborn expectations, heaven begins lifting you with divine precision. Another essential part of rising is allowing truth to reshape you. Spiritual ascent requires you to confront places within yourself that became misaligned during your drift. This confrontation is uncomfortable, but necessary. You must allow God to reveal patterns that weaken you, habits that distract you, and attitudes that limit your growth. These internal shifts are the foundation upon which your ascent is built. Without truth, there can be no elevation. Fallen angels fell because they rejected truth in favor of pride. You rise when you embrace truth in humility. Rising also requires spiritual discipline. Discipline is the fuel that sustains elevation. When your prayer life becomes consistent again, your spirit gains strength. When your discernment sharpens, your decisions improve. When you prioritize spiritual nourishment, your inner world stabilizes. Discipline is not about perfection, it is about commitment. A chosen one grows powerful, not by praying once or reading once, but by developing sacred habits that anchor their destiny. These habits become spiritual armor, shielding you from traps designed to pull you down. As you rise, you must learn to separate your emotions from your assignment. Emotional reactions can cloud spiritual decisions, and the enemy often uses emotions to sway chosen ones away from divine timing. Rising means learning to feel deeply, but move wisely. Your emotions may fluctuate, but your obedience must remain steady. This steadiness is what transforms your spiritual authority. The higher you rise, the more you must master your inner world. An uncontrolled heart becomes an easy target for traps. A disciplined heart becomes untouchable. Another crucial part of ascent is learning to walk with spiritual confidence. Confidence is not arrogance. It is awareness of who God called you to be. When you rise, you must step out of self-doubt, insecurity, and the belief that your past disqualifies you. Many chosen ones hesitate to rise because they feel unworthy. But rising is not about worthiness. It is about willingness. Heaven lifts the one who says yes. When you step into your identity boldly, traps lose their authority. The enemy cannot hinder someone who knows who they are spiritually. Rising also requires separation from environments that weaken your soul. You cannot rise in the same atmosphere that caused your drift. You must remove yourself from patterns, people, and places that pull your spirit downward. Elevation demands distance from anything that feeds your lower self. This separation is not rejection, it is protection. When God elevates you, He shifts your environment so your spirit can breathe again. Fallen beings fell because they aligned themselves with the wrong atmosphere. You rise by aligning with environments that nurture your calling. As you climb, you must also learn to listen more closely to divine timing. Rising is not just about movement. It is about movement at the right time. God will open doors for you, but rising means waiting until He says enter. He will position people to help you, but rising means discerning who is sent and who is a distraction. Divine timing is the rhythm of ascent. When you move in that rhythm, every step becomes smooth, purposeful, and protected. When you resist timing, you create friction in your own journey. The path upward is guided, not rushed. Another powerful aspect of rising is allowing your past to become wisdom instead of weight. Your mistakes, failures, and drift seasons were not meant to break you. They were meant to teach you. Rising means releasing shame and embracing experience. Every moment you survived is now spiritual insight. Every wrong turn is now a signpost guiding you away from future traps. A chosen one rises higher when they stop mourning the past and start learning from it. The enemy wants your past to weaken you. God wants your past to strengthen you. As you rise, you must also protect your mind. The ascent is mental as much as spiritual. You must fill your thoughts with truth, clarity, and divine reminders. When negative thoughts appear, you must confront them with spiritual authority. When doubt speaks, you must answer it. When fear whispers, you must silence it with faith. A rising chosen one does not let their mind run wild. They steward their thoughts like sacred territory. The mind determines the altitude of your spirit. Rising also requires courage. To ascend is to leave behind what feels safe but stagnant. It means stepping into assignments that challenge your comfort. Elevation takes bravery because it pulls you into new versions of yourself. But every chosen one is equipped with divine courage. When you choose to rise despite your fear, heaven supports your steps. The path upward always begins with a brave decision. The decision to trust God more than you trust your comfort. Another vital part of ascent is recognizing divine nudges quickly. When God prompts you to act, speak, pause, separate, or pray, you must respond immediately. Rising requires obedience without delay. Every time you respond quickly, your spirit gains momentum. Every time you hesitate, you lose spiritual height. The enemy relies on your hesitation. God relies on your obedience. A chosen one rises by mastering their response to divine instruction. As you rise, relationships shift. Not everyone can go where God is taking you. Rising means accepting that some connections will fall away naturally. The higher you climb, the fewer people can breathe the same spiritual atmosphere. This is not loneliness, it is elevation. Many chosen ones sabotage their ascent by trying to bring everyone with them. But rising requires discernment. You must know who is assigned to your next level and who is tied to your previous one. Rising also requires forgiveness. Unforgiveness anchors your spirit to the ground. It keeps you emotionally tied to moments God already released you from. When you forgive, you cut the rope that holds you down. Forgiveness frees your heart, sharpens your spirit, and lightens your path. Many chosen ones rise instantly the moment they let go of bitterness. It is one of the most powerful acts of spiritual liberation. Finally, rising requires faith in motion. Not faith in theory, not faith in imagination. Faith expressed through steps, actions, decisions, and obedience. Rising is not passive, it is active. You climb as you trust, you ascend as you move, you rise as you believe. Heaven cannot elevate someone who refuses to take the first step. Chosen one. The path of ascent is open to you now. Your drift did not disqualify you. Your mistakes did not cancel your destiny. Your misalignment did not remove your calling. Heaven is waiting for your rise, and every step you take will seal your destiny more firmly. The traps beneath you lose power the moment you choose to climb. Rise with intention. Rise with clarity. Rise with courage. Rise because you were chosen not to fall, but to ascend. Conclusion. A final warning and a final lifting word. Chosen one. This message came to you not by accident, not by coincidence, and not by random timing. It arrived because heaven has been watching your steps, measuring your spiritual posture, and observing the quiet shifts taking place within your heart. You have been standing at a spiritual intersection where one path leads upward into divine purpose and the other path drifts downward into the pattern of a fallen angel. The Most High sent this message to interrupt that drift, to shake your spirit awake, and to realign you before any unseen danger could pull you further from your assignment. Every sentence you heard, every truth that stirred you, and every revelation that pressed on your heart was heaven correcting your direction. You must understand that your destiny is too valuable for you to move carelessly. Your calling is too powerful for complacency. The enemy is always waiting for the moment you ignore divine guidance, because that is the only moment he gains access. But now you know his strategy. Now you understand the signs of drifting. Now you recognize the law of falling, and now you have learned the path of ascent. You are no longer walking blindly. You are walking with awareness, and awareness is the beginning of spiritual mastery. But this message does more than warn you. It empowers you. It tells you that you still have time. It tells you that heaven has not turned away. It tells you that your destiny has not been cancelled. God sent correction because God still intends to elevate you. If he had no plans for you, he would have remained silent. But instead, he spoke loudly through this message because your future still matters. Your assignment still carries weight. Your presence in this world still has divine purpose. Chosen one. You must now decide to walk in obedience, clarity, and spiritual discipline. You must protect your mind, guard your spirit, honor divine timing, and distance yourself from anything that lowers your spiritual frequency. Every step you take in alignment becomes a declaration that you will not repeat the fate of those who once carried glory and fell. You are not destined to fall. You are destined to rise. And rising begins with one intentional choice: to stay aligned with the will of God. If something in this message awakened your spirit, then let heaven acknowledge your obedience. Comment one number that reflects your readiness to rise, 777. And make sure you stay connected to Spirit Guide, tap the bell icon, and share this message with someone who needs divine clarity. Chosen one. Your fate is not descent. Your fate is elevation. Your path is not darkness. Your path is light. And now that heaven has spoken, you must walk forward with boldness, obedience, and unwavering spiritual awareness. Your rise begins now.